So today, Parliament resumes. The headline in the Standard today is that MPs are under siege, whatever that means. And if they're under siege, they're resuming because the top on the agenda will be finance bill and discussion around next year's budget. But there's also a march against the Finance Bill 2023. It's called Sita Sita, March Against Finance Bill 2023. Kenyans to carry flags and whistles. Meeting point at Jivanji Gardens at 8 a.m. on the 6th day of June 2023. One of those organizers of this particular march is Mutemi wa Kiama. He is the community organizer for Kongamano la Mapinduzi. He's in the studio. Good morning, Mwalimu.
Good morning, Eric. Good morning, Du. Good morning, City.
Welcome again to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Shukran.
Karibu sana.
Glad to be here.
You've said today is Sita Sita and hakuna kusita sita.
I am not one of the organizers, but I'm a participant. The protest today is organized by, among others, the Social Justice Movement,
Yes.
Kenya Human Rights Commission, na mashirika zinginezo. Leo tumesema hakuna kusita sita ya kijamii.
Sawa.
Hakuna kusita sita.
City has the day's proverb.
Yes, our proverbs for the whole of this week are from the country of Malawi. A deer tethered with a golden chain can escape to the forest to eat grass.
A deer tethered with a golden chain can escape to the forest to eat grass. Well, tell me, what do you make of this proverb?
Wow, that's a hard one. Is it an African proverb?
It's Malawian.
Malawian proverb. I think the tether, I don't know, something to do with gold being very soft, that it cannot hold back. It's an imaginary tether, or even if it exists, it's meant to create an illusion of being tethered, because gold is very soft and malleable, so it cannot really hold back a deer that wants to escape. I think that's my take.
That's your take on it.
Yeah.
It's never wrong.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
It isn't, and you're right on every account.
Thank you.
Ah, yeah. So tell us about this Sita Sita march.
Remember the last conversation we had when I was here? We were talking about how the Kenyan economy does not work for Kenyans, and how it's just a continuation of the colonial extractive state. And basically, there's nothing that illustrates this. I think I was here about 2 months ago. There's nothing that illustrates this, and the conversation we've had around the finance bill, which basically is, there's a process for budgeting, and this bill kind of ignores the last several months of public participation and conversations around the proposals by the Kenya Kwanza regime. And basically what you're seeing, the intimidation that you're seeing, the headline on the Standard today, MPs under siege, is that a lot of the siege is not actually from citizens, because they're supposed to be representing us. The siege is actually from the executive. We've just seen the intimidation from the deputy president, the intimidation from the president, instructions that we will watch how you vote. I don't know how they'll do that, because parliament voting is supposed to be secret ballot, and MPs are supposed to vote on using their conscience. I don't know whether they'll put a camera near the box and ask everybody, let's see how you're voting. But it's very worrying. And basically we are regressing. We are going back to the one-man show, the dictatorship. And part of the reason why there are protests today is the fact that the people are not being listened to. And by the people, I mean ordinary Kenyans, professionals, employers. I look at the finance bill. We're not even talking about what it should cost employers to, for example, the Standard Group here. I don't know how many employees the Standard Group has, that it has to pay 3% for each of those people. That's an extra hit on its bottom line in a very intimidating economic period when everything is going down. In fact, anybody who's employing people right now in Kenya, who is not government, are going through a lot. I wonder if anybody is making a profit. Are we looking at the effect of that on the economy? If you talk about pay slips, it's people who, in Kenya, we are very socialists, despite us calling ourselves capitalists. Anybody who has a pay slip, especially those who work for government, a policeman, a soldier, a civil servant, a teacher, the entire community depends on them.
Yeah.
They hit onto that pay slip. I think the Standard did a calculation. If you're earning 50,000, which is the average wage of most graduates in this country, the so-called middle class, after taxation, you'll take home less than 25,000 shillings. That is before you spend money on anything. That's why you're going to the streets.
So what do you want at the end of the day today?
We want a government that listens to the people. All economic experts that have been interviewed, apart from the Kenya Kwanza parrots, have said this is not advisable. Even General Miguna, who was very supportive of this government when it was coming in, has asked the president to withdraw this finance or to revise the finance bill
He's
and
also an
remove
economic
these punitive taxes.
So what do you want? So you want a government that listens, all right? In the last 3 or so weeks, the Finance Committee of the National Assembly has been listening, has been inviting people to speak to it, has been receiving memoranda. Have you sent your memorandum to the Finance Committee?
We have sent memoranda. Various organizations that I partner with, including Okwa Uchumi. There's actually a petition, an online petition that I developed that is going around. Kenyans are signing. Is on Change.org, but also those submissions have been done to Parliament. What is intimidating is the fact that just this weekend the Deputy President said it doesn't matter what you protest or they send those memoranda or whatever you do, ishapita.
Okay. If we're coming off that last statement that you said, Mutemi, if we're saying, I mean, because it's a bit of a difficult conversation to have, isn't it? If for all intents and purposes, this is a fait accompli, from all that we've heard, and now we are saying, we want you to listen to us as government, for who is the audience here? Who is the one who then would listen and do something about it if we've already been told, not once, not twice, by the Deputy President, by the President, and said, look, this thing is going to go through, it's going to go through. Who are we hoping will listen that will then bring about change? Because I do believe strongly that activism, even as we act, even as we speak out, even as we continually lobby for or against things, there is an audience then that is influenced to answer in one way or another.
In this particular case, our audience is Parliament, because now the bill is before Parliament. It has not become law yet. It has not become an act of Parliament. And we are telling our MPs that if you don't listen to us, I think there's evidence enough in the last few weeks that Kenyans are totally engaged on this issue, on this matter. In fact, we've seen some MPs actually changing their position from where they were a few weeks ago to where they are today, and standing with the people. We've seen MPs going back to the ground to consult. But what has been most interesting is the reaction of some of the social media platforms. And especially from Rift Valley, where the president comes from. It's been surprising to see a lot of resistance on TikTok coming from the Rift Valley. And you're saying the MPs need to listen. And if they don't listen, I think, apart from the fact that I think this time Kenyans will not return them, what you're doing, for example, the protest that you're organizing will build up towards probably a referendum to do away with Parliament. Because
you just repeat that again, Mutemi?
Yes, a referendum to do away with Parliament. If you look at it structurally, Parliament serves no purpose in terms of the constitution 2010. It was actually just kept there to pass the constitution because they could not do away with it. But if you look at our administrative structures, the National Assembly serves absolutely no purpose. In fact, what it has become now is just a rubber stamp of the executive. And it keeps passing laws that are anti-people. So there are quite serious discussions going on around kupunguza the mzigo, that Kenyans, the burden of Kenyans with 349 members of parliament, to look at that structure, because the devolution said, let's take power to the people, let's devolve power. And the units of devolution, the county government, the wards, and the village councils. What is parliament supposed to do? What is it for? Anyway, or rather, parliament, by parliament I mean the National Assembly.
Okay.
What purpose does it serve for, apart from just passing anti-people laws?
So there's a lot that you're saying, and let's unpack it. Okay. Number one, focusing on the finance bill. Yes, there has been a lot of conversation around the country on the finance bill. Some debate, discussions on the contents of the finance bill, some engagement at various levels. But as civil society organizations, and you play in the civil society space, do you feel the civil society has actually taken the job of having explainers with the public that this is what, basically just conducting civic education, this is the content of the finance bill, and letting the people to talk? Today's demonstrations are being organized by, among others, the social justice networks. Have the social justice networks actually held meetings at community level to discuss the finance bill in detail? Not just coming and saying hatutaki housing fund, but just going in detail. These are the areas that the finance bill is harmful to us, and these are the areas that we don't have a problem with. Because, I mean, you can't have a problem with 100% of the finance bill.
The conversations have happened. Actually, they're still ongoing. Just yesterday in Mathare, Senator Mtata and part of the civil society social justice working group and some NGOs were hosted by citizens, and they had those conversations. But even beyond that is that where we are today, Kenyans know these things. They understand these things. Actually, I'm so surprised by the pushback that has come from what are called ordinary Kenyans, although I don't believe they are ordinary and extraordinary Kenyans. I think all Kenyans should be the same. The pushback shows that Kenyans understand the issues. But also, if you look at the petition, the online petition, those issues are listed. If you look at the graphics that are being shared on social media, the contentious issues have been listed. Tax on baby formula, tax on insurance benefit. I heard you discussing issues of during the Kibaki government, taxation on Harambe. The difference between now and then is actually, and we've been quoting Singapore a lot. Actually, the difference between now and then is that in the 70s, when Kibaki was the Minister for Finance or Planning, Singapore was built on what we call meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty, and that is what we lack. In fact, if you look at during the Kibaki's reign as president, Kenyans paid taxes willingly because we had an honest government. We were told kulipa ushuru kujitegemea, and we reduced corruption initially. Towards the end, of course, we went back to default settings. And Kenyans were willing to pay because they could see what the resources were being used for. If you're taxing people Harambe, and they can see what the taxes are going to do, people will pay. Kenyans have always, Kenyans have always been very law abiding, wanting to support government. But unfortunately, the regime we have is not honest. It is not meritocratic. And it's not pragmatic. If you look, how do you add 8% to fuel when you're going to double almost everything, the cost of everything? How is that being pragmatic? And you're quoting Singapore.
Are there parts of this finance bill that you are okay with?
Very few. There are very few. There's an attempt to expand taxation beyond the current the current payslip. People who have payslips, but this is being done in a way that you're putting punitive taxes. You're actually putting the burden even on the people with payslips who've been dutifully paying taxes, and this is part of the things you're saying we need to discuss. And experts have given, tax experts have given opinions on how this can be done more effectively. Don't squeeze the ones who are already totally squeezed. Spread this to other sectors, but also don't. And Devon D, my friend and someone who I've always respected, I can't believe the iteration I'm seeing, because he spoke a lot to all these manner of taxations that are being proposed when he was not in government, and he gave adequate reasons. I don't want to go into them. They're actually available online, and his articles that he's written in The Nation and other spaces. This is not the way to expand the cake, to the piece of the ugali. Let's say we were talking about ugali earlier on. This is not how to cook the ugali and make sure that everybody, by squeezing those who are already overly burdened.
Do you think that there will, because people will lobby today, people will be out in the streets, do you think that the resultant effect of this will actually bring about the attention onto action that we seek?
The challenge you have, actually, if the elephant in the room is debt. And this debt that civil society has spoken about, I think as early as 2014, I wrote to the controller of debt at that time, asking, could we see the debt register?
Yeah.
And there was no reply, because we could see that's 9 years ago. We could see where we're headed, and that's the borrowing that has happened in the last regime, of which the current, president was the deputy president, which he justified. The Gachagua deputy president also justified, went to defend on TV and radio. Kimani Ichung'wah, the majority leader, was in charge of the public accounts committee, budget. He defended all that spending. In fact, he was in charge of expanding the borrowing, removing debt limits. So that is the elephant in the room. And that is what is being obfuscated by all these other, the fact is that the IMF has told the government of Kenya, if you want to borrow, I heard you talking about borrowing earlier on, you need to guarantee us that you can raise revenues.
Yes.
But we also know that, according to the government itself, we lose 700 billion every year. And we say that so casually, as if it's
2 shillings.
2 shillings. You know what a billion is? I heard you talk about 2,000 shillings raffle at Sarit. Eric, if you got 1 billion shillings today, or city, and you spent 10,000 shillings every day, umalize. Every day you spend 10,000 shillings. It will take you 273 years to finish 1 billion shillings.
How much is it?
Sorry?
273 years.
Spending 10,000 a day.
10,000 a day. If you spent 100,000 a day, it will take you 27 years to finish 1 billion shillings. So we throw around these figures as if they're nothing. Yet we are talking about losing 700 billion. Thika Road costs 20 something up to, let's say, around roughly 27 billion, around 30 billion.
That's a 30.
So 300 billion can build you 10 Thika roads. 700 billion can build you 20 Thika roads every year. That is every year. So if you look at when Thika road was built, since then, every road in Kenya, including in my village in Kirinyaga, would be a dual carriageway if we spent that money prudently. So it's not that we don't have the money. We are expanding the tax base.
Spending.
It's just we need to, spend the money prudently. Mudhonyi Uko said, the intimidation that we're seeing in Parliament, they're under siege. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, You have a parliament of wash, and you're going after NGOs. It's intimidation actually, going after NGOs according to those headlines. And you rightly talked about the PBO Act that was signed into law in 2013 by Kibaki. The then government refused to implement the PBO Act. And that's after years of contestation for it to be passed, including the government agreeing to it and being signed into law by Kibaki. And then the NGO board refused, because the NGO board wanted to continue in the new authority that was proposed by the Act. Then refused to operationalize, to work with the minister to operationalize the law. And NGOs went to court to ask for the law to be implemented, not for it not to be implemented. The impression is that it's NGOs that don't want accountability.
That are fighting.
No, they went and they want it implemented. And since 2013, there have been several judgments by courts on that. And what has government been doing? It has been that time it was in the devolution ministry.
Yeah.
Now it was moved. The statement you read is by the Ministry of Interior. After the courts ruled, they moved the department to the Ministry of Interior to defeat the law. So for 10 years, since 2013, the government has been playing hide and seek with the courts on the same law that they're saying NGOs are not being accountable. That's the kind of, that's the kind of shenanigans that we're saying. That's why you're going to the streets. Implement the law, then you tell us, hold us to account to that law that was signed into law by Kibaki.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation with Mutemi wa Kiama, who's a community organizer with Kongamano la Mapinduzi. He's one of those that will be participating in today's street march, Sita March Against Finance Bill 2023. They are kongamanaing at Jivanjee Gardens at 8 a.m. to have this march and to protest against the finance bill. So what we want to understand is, so what exactly do you want to see at the end of this day? So yeah, you have marched, you're holding the placards, and then at the end of the day, you go home. And then just like Rigiji told us, this thing becomes law. So then what? What's the point? So what is the plan? The plan is to march around the streets of Nairobi. Are you going to Parliament? Are you going to the Finance Ministry? Are you going to State House? Where will you be going?
Usually,
what's the message?
The route is from Jivanjee to Treasury, and then to Parliament, and we present petitions. Part of the petitions is it's mostly symbolic because. Procedurally, the submissions from civil society organizations have already been submitted to the parliamentary committee, just to make sure that Kenyans are aware, and the MPs are aware that we are following up. We're not just submitting these and sitting in the sidelines as the debate ranges. Eric. If you look at the last 3 years, we've had a drought in the northern Kenya. It hasn't rained. Then when it rained, a lot of livestock passed on, died, and then when it rained, a lot of them also died. The ones that had remained because the water, the floods, and that kind of thing. But the worst thing is that we do not plan for these things. And this has been happening since independence. Now we have El Nino on the way. We already know. The meteorological department has predicted, not just the local one that some people don't trust, but even the global one. Yeah. That information is available. What are we doing, for that water, in planning for that water that is expected to be surplus? Since the Kibaki regime, we've allocated billions, I think hundreds of billions, towards dams, earth pans, etc., ways to retain water so that you mitigate effects of drought. These are the kind of things you expect to be talking about, our MPs to be questioning, where did that money go? Because you don't have the dams, you don't have the pans, and you spent hundreds of billions towards that. Instead of squeezing Kenyans even more, when people can barely put food on the table. In fact, I'm wondering, with the current cost of a packet of unga or sugar, how some people are even being able to go to work. So we are saying we need this conversation to be had. And we also need to debate this colonial extractive state, whether we still want to be part of it. Because taxation without representation, then what does that mean?
It doesn't serve us.
Doesn't serve
But then
us.
there's a lot of talk, Mutemi, and that's why I keep asking this question. We talk all the time. I mean, there's been public discussion about this finance bill. People have gone, yourselves included, you have gone before Parliament, you have presented your petition. They listened to various interest groups who came and presented, and Parliamentary Committee did what it was supposed to do. It has listened to people, it asked questions, it engaged. The report is going to Parliament. It'll comprise all those things, it'll be having all those inputs and their considered view on all those inputs. We follow due process. So why do we need to keep talking?
If this bill passes as it is, first of all, it's going to hit not just the ordinary. Initially, it's going to hit the employers. So people are already talking about rationalizing jobs. Firing some people, basically they're going to fire people. So even the current taxpayers are going to reduce. It's not going to spur economic growth, according to a lot of experts who have analyzed this bill. So what are we saying? As you said, enough of the talk. That's why Kongamano Mapinduzi, we're in the process of mobilizing and organizing for a referendum, which you're calling the Punda Amechoka referendum. I heard Baba the other day talking about Punda Amechoka. That's we've not consulted, or he's not consulted us, but we have a referendum that we're organizing called Punda Amechoka. And I hope I can come back and discuss that in depth. But basically what it is about is reducing the number of MPs at the national level, from the current ones, collapsing the two houses into one, so that we have one National Assembly and a true National Assembly, doing away with the current constituencies as they exist, and having the county become the constituency, so that we elect 4 MPs per county, just the way we elect the woman MP today. Each county gives us 1 man, 1 woman, 1 young person, and 1 special interest, so that we actually have gender 50-50. And then we reduce the number of MPs. 47 times 4 is 188. We will reduce your mzigo tupunguze kabisa.
Yeah.
But we also have, because we now have county MPs sent to the National Assembly to represent Kenyans and their counties and to fight for the national cake, then we change that dynamic, whereby we have actually people who represent us, no taxation without representation. These people will go there to represent the wishes of the people in the counties.
Okay.
We need to change that governance structure. And the best way for that to gain momentum, actually, is for this finance bill to pass as it is in Parliament. We shall not continue talking.
Okay. Yes. I do feel, though, that when we look at ACT, again, going back to lobbying, that for me, in order for the results of lobbying to be achieved or attained, that act of lobbying must be constant. The activism must be constant. It must be known to those who are in these positions that the people in general are not going to keep quiet once they're satisfied by just a little bite of the carrot. That it must be a situation that continually keeps them on their toes. In the very beginning, Mutemi, you spoke and you said that almost as though you don't have confidence in Parliament. This comes before Parliament today, this finance bill. They're going to discuss this, then they will vote on it, in time. We are almost saying that we don't have confidence in them. We've talked about corruption, that some of the issues that are even surrounding this finance bill are not even issues to do with the brick and mortar of the bill, but it's the issues that, are around it. Corruption, impunity, the theft of public resources that has happened over time, that are basically taking food out of the, not plates, out of the mouths of Kenyans before it goes down. But I'm not even saying that we're not taking leaders seriously. Leaders are not taking Kenyans seriously because the constant push to have them be accountable does not exist. in my opinion, that there's a finance bill, then we make a lot of noise, then we go and sit down. Then something else comes up, then we make a lot of noise, then we sit down. It has to be constant in order for it to achieve something. But they know that maybe some noise will happen, and then after some time there will be silence. What do you think about that?
That's a very powerful point. Is what we call democracy thrives when you have what is called eternal vigilance, and human nature calls for us to have eternal vigilance. And remember the conversation we had last time, and what I started with. We have what we call an extractive colonial state, basically capitalism. And what it does is that it keeps the people impoverished, so that you can have a labor of pool, a cheap pool of labor. Pool of labor. So you're talking about people who, when a packet of unga is going for 250. Cannot even earn 250 shillings in a day. So it becomes a challenge for the ordinary person to keep that vigilance because they have to survive. It's survival for the fittest. And that is why NGOs exist. But even NGOs, right now, we are talking about a period where even those who have been funding NGOs, and especially the foreigners who have been funding us, are tired of funding. Because that money comes from the ordinary Wanjiko in Britain or in the UK, US or wherever. Yeah. And even them, they are facing their own challenges. In fact, part of the work that I'm doing right now is to try and find ways to fundraise locally, to get Kenyans. The other day I was in Marsabit, and I was trying to mobilize a few of my friends to support 30 families for 3 months at 12,000 shillings a month. But why are we doing that? Why should we be doing that in a country that at independence said, those are some of the things that are supposed to be addressed. Those are basics. Food is a basic. Housing, shelter should be basic. Yet our people cannot even afford. For example, right now, a lot of these protests, I've seen something different on TikTok right now because Kenyans are asking even Baba, where are you? Call those Maandamanos now. But there's something very rare. Most of the time, NGOs have to give the protesters, what is called transport reimbursement. And basically transport reimbursement is saying, okay, today you've not gone to look for that 200 bob that you used to feed your family. So just get this because you've curbed. But that situation is also not sustainable. Where is that money coming from? But what this government is pushing us to, if TikTok is anything to go by, is that now you don't need to even give anybody transport reimbursement. We just need to be much more organized.
They will come.
They will come and march. And that is the situation, personally, I can tell you, as someone who's as a middle class person, I've been trying to avoid. We've been trying to ask for,
It's today that we will see whether indeed, people are just willingly going to come out and participate in a demonstration. If your demonstration today is able to mobilize people who have heard about it, who've seen the social media flyers going round, and they willingly come out to join you in the demonstration, in the march, because it's a march, it's not. If people come out, then we can say, okay, there's a shift here, there's a change, there's how people react. But I want to come back to the question. Look, Mutemi, this is June. The financial year ends at the end of this month. A new financial year begins next month. The finance bill must be law by the end of this month. So then the government is able to know how it's raising the revenues for the next budget. So as we all say, we are opposed to the finance bill, are we opposing the bill in its entirety? Excuse me. Are we opposing sections of the bill? Are we saying what we want to see instead? How we want to finance government operations in the next financial year? Is that what we are having? We'll be having a conversation with the Deputy Minority Leader at 9 a.m. today. And of course, we've heard Azimio saying we are going to reject this bill. The so what question comes in. And then what? I think so you want to say no to the finance bill, and then what?
Eric, I think it's been, Kenyans have been very vocal about the sections of the bill that they want amended. But the thing is, there's already a Finance Act in place government is not going to collapse because we don't pass this. What actually we are passing, the proposed bill is an amendment to the Finance Act.
Yeah.
So already the taxation will continue based on
the existing
law.
law.
The existing law. So it's not, there are people are saying government is going to collapse if we don't pass the finance bill and all that. It's not going to. Government is going to go. Those laws, the taxation will continue. What we are opposed to are the punitive, violative, how do you tax insurance benefits, surely, in a country where even that, even getting paid for, those benefits are very hard to come by for insurance. How do you even target that? How do you sit down and say, okay, what are you going to tax?
What's here?
Insurance benefits. Like, what kind of insidiousness is that level? Or baby formula? And what has gotten, that's what the elephant in the room. Let's address what has gotten us there. President Ruto came in and said, we are going to, the previous budget, we're going to reduce it by 300 billion. What did they do? They increased by 600 billion. So where is the honesty? If you're talking about being like Singapore, where is the, like show us. If this government had shown us in the last 8 months that they've been in power, that they are honest, that these actually attempts to reduce the wastage, then we'd be having a very different conversation right now.
If I were to look at politicians and those in leadership and look at them as individuals who mirror what we as Kenyans actually are, then I would say that even when we say we're having an honest conversation, we are not. Because, yes, from everything that one reads and one hears, this finance bill is atrocious, and they'd like to do away with it. You and your groupings have come up with what you see as a solution, and you have suggested. Yet, this very same constitution allows the citizens to kick out leaders they don't want. Whether it's an MCA, whether it's an MP, we only know of governors because of what we've seen. Now, surely, even as we go through this painful process of trying to enact what we know could work, the one action that would get people thinking seriously is if they knew they would lose their jobs. So long as members of parliament know they have 5 years, irrespective of what they do, how they vote, what they do, do you really honestly think, Mutemi, that they will actually be bothered by what we think or what we do?
That's again that's why I love this show, a very powerful point. We have a recall clause in our laws, and that recall clause was designed, I think, by the 10th Parliament to not work.
Yes.
Because it says, I remember Mother Carol was the Minister for Justice then, and she's my cousin. I'm calling her out. That it requires, you cannot recall somebody if they've not been in Parliament for 2.5 years. And then you cannot recall them if we are 1 year to the next election. So what that does in this very litigant society is that you can basically not recall anybody. You cannot. That law is actually designed to fail. Which is why Kongamano la Mapinduzi and other organizations are organizing a referendum to reorganize some of these laws. Kongamano la Mapinduzi, hopefully, we are mobilizing Kenyans, and hopefully we want to register a political party within 2 or 3 years. One of the things we want for that political party that is truly bottom up is that you sign an affidavit. If you're going to be nominated to be a candidate in any office, you go and swear before a competent officer of the law that you're being sent to go and represent X, Y, Z. We are calling it Kiapo. And if you don't, regardless of what the recall clause says, we can withdraw that support. And once you withdraw that support, you lose your seat because you've already committed to it at a personal level.
So it's like a social contract.
It's a social contract with the people. So we pointed out to the gaps that we have And again, we can't continue talking and asking and begging our MPs to do this. So that's why we are saying Kongamano Mapinduzi is actually about what can we really do, because you can see the patterns of the last 60 years.
When Ford was formed, the principles that guided the formation were even stronger than the ones you're uttering now. And when you look at the body of individuals who were there, who had suffered under the Moi regime, and what they stood for, then what did we see?
And you know what happened? They were bought one by one. They were bought out. What we have, and I can confidently say this about Kongamano Mapinduzi, is that part of the challenge you have actually, even the civil society space, is that we are not saints. There are issues there.
They're human beings.
The human beings are not saints. So what we've learned from our elders and from the failures of the people who've organized before us is that let's put systems in place. Let's put systems in place to hold each other to account. If you see the fights, the biggest fights that have come from the last Uhuru's regime and this regime are against the so-called independent institutions. Why? Because these independent institutions, should they work, means that that 700 billion that we lose every year is going to be at least reduced. We can't eat as much as we want.
Yeah.
If you look at the proposed amendment to the corruption law, there's an MP who, I don't know why he would even try to pass that at this time when Kenyans are discussing the finance bill, that kind of reduces the offense if you're involved in procurement, whatever, designing a procurement law, that still, I don't know, the fine is being reduced to 10,000 shillings. So basically, they are telling us they want us to be able to loot, to continue the extraction, it's called what? The colonial extractive.
Mutemi, the thing that concerns me, every time I listen to you, I do not doubt that you are sincere. I do not doubt. I do not doubt you mean what you say. But the underlying rot is that we have very many people in the space that you occupy who say exactly the same things that you say. But when push, it doesn't even get to shove. It just starts at push. And suddenly you're wondering what happened. Because if indeed this Kongamano, the Mageuzi,
Mapinduzi.
The Mageuzi is mine.
The difference is Mageuzi is reform,
yes.
Mapinduzi is revolution.
Yes.
So we're not calling for reform anymore.
You're calling for revolution.
Couple the whole thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
You see, in all sincerity, don't you think that if the people you are now congregating with and talking with were of a mind similar to yours, that a lot more would have happened by now?
That's a very good point. And the attribution also in the struggle is a very serious issue, because it's very hard to continue struggling, and especially in this very thankless country where even the people you're working for are the ones who fight you.
With these thankless people
are fighting you, and you have bills to pay. You have a
life to live.
So it's not easy, and I don't actually blame anybody who decides, no, I cannot do this anymore, because one of my mentors in organizing, Scott Solalinsky, I think I've quoted him before, says you organize in the world as it is, as you organize towards the world as it should be. So we are in a society that is the way it is. It's corrupt. It's debilitating. Living every day is a struggle. So you have to realize, and that's why it takes time. That's why, but there are people who are committed. I can tell you this, for example, because we've been organizing with them for the last 3 years. Kongamano Mageuzi is how we started. People got tired and stepped. We were infiltrated. Others fell aside. We went back and regrouped. And we are moving, and that's not to say some of us will not fall by the wayside. Yeah. But we have, it's as Ndu said, a turn of vigilance. We have to continue organizing. But the difference with Kongamano, this is again from what we've learned from our elders, people like CJ Emeritus, William Tunga, people like John Gidongo, people like Maina Kiai who come. They said what they did not do is that they did not seek the political kingdom. So Kongamano Mapinduzi is not a social movement, it's a political movement. We are organizing to take over politics in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And we're organizing long term. We're not reacting to the usual electoral cycles.
Because it's a long game.
So we are playing the long game. In fact, I'm sure Ruto and Gachagua should not be threatened by Kongamano, because unless they decide to change the constitution to continue, to remove term limits, they will not be our target. Our target is 2032. Can we field candidates in every office who are pro-people?
Okay.
Yeah.
Mutemi, thank you very much for joining us today.
Spice.